Welcome to Face2Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face2Face. So my next interview is with director Pat Mills, talking about his new film that was released at the Toronto world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival called Don't Talk To Irene. You're going to want to get out to see this. It's a really delightful film about what I would call a really serious matter, and that is how we deal with others. It's about being young. It's about coming of age. It's about bullying. It's about how does one fit in, actually. Isn't that a kind of a question that we're always asking? It's about relationships and mentorship, and it's about gender and the media and how we deal with old people. Isn't it fascinating that you can get all of this into a film that's funny and just a lot of fun to watch? And come on, Geena Davis as God. I mean, I think that's worth heading out to your local theater for. So coming right up, Pat Mills and Don't Talk To Irene. Oh yeah, by the way, we also are able to ring in Milli Vanilli into the conversation as well, and why Pat had to spend so much money just to find his neighbor. You're going to enjoy the interview with Pat, and you're going to love the film. Don't Talk To Irene. Don't forget davidpecklive.com for more information about my writing and speaking, face2facelive.ca for a whole other host of interviews with filmmakers and authors, and also don't forget rabble.ca for more writing, more podcasts, more information from a whole slew of other writers as well, and contributors about issues that matter. Coming right up, Pat Mills and Don't Talk To Irene. Well, welcome to Face2Face. We are joined by a very special guest today. Director Pat Mills is here with us to talk about his new film, Don't Talk To Irene, fresh off of, I think, a Q&A, actually. Pat, thanks so much for your time here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's really... Hey, listen, congratulations on a delightful, fun, and engaging film, Don't Talk To Irene. It's a real charming film. And yet...
Great, thank you, David.
Yeah, and so... I think so relevant for so many reasons. So where are you coming from? So your Q&A, Toronto release, you've been at a few festivals, I think, of late, haven't you?
Yeah, we premiered at TIFF a few weeks ago, and then I've been at a few festivals since, and I flew in from Calgary at their film festival last night, got right off the plane, and then directly to Yonge and Dundas, where we had a theatrical release to do a Q&A. So I've just been kind of all over the place with the film, but it's all good because people are really liking the film, and the Q&As are always really fun to do.
Yeah, no, you got to be pretty pleased with that. So Q&As are fun to do. Is there any kind of, I don't know, are people landing? Is there a theme that people, Calgary, Toronto, different festivals, are there questions that keep popping up?
The main question that I usually get is, how did you get Geena Davis?
Right.
That's been asked everywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
And a lot of people ask about, like, how much did it cost to make? But that's, I think any film that plays at a festival and you get to meet the director, people ask questions they don't always want to answer.
Right. That's pretty funny. I'd love to hear how you got Geena Davis. But more importantly to me is, why did you put her in the God's eye view position? That's probably more interesting to me.
On the ceiling poster?
Well,
just her as God.
Her as God, that voice, she's speaking into not, and I thought it was wonderful how at the end of the film it's, my time with you is done, Irene, I need to move on. This is not just what, because you kind of wonder through the story if this is just sort of a very rich fantasy life. And it seems like there's, Geena Davis is playing a bit more of a central role.
Yeah, well, it to me, like, Geena Davis kind of, she represents sort of like this warmth and this toughness and everything that I feel like a mentor should have, or a godlike character should have, which is you're kind of masculine, you're kind of feminine, you're soft, you're hard. And the thing that I've always loved about Geena Davis is, like, she can nail comedy, she can nail action, she can nail drama. Like, she's been able to do it all. And then with her Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media,
yeah, sure,
it seems like it really makes sense for her to, like, guide an awkward teenage girl through the awkward years of your life and arm her with confidence. And I've just always really been drawn to her because I've always thought that she's had such a great sense of humor in all of her films and her interviews. And, she's a member of Mensa. Like, she's kind of got it all.
Yeah.
So,
which kind of comes out, which comes out in the film as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I've got it all. I'm Geena Davis.
And I've got it all, Geena Davis. That's very true. So it's also kind of random as well. And this film has a lot of, like, random ideas thrown in and mixed together. And so I wrote the script with her in mind, hoping that she would say yes, even though I knew that it was a long shot. So when we approached her, we were all pretty, like, pleasantly surprised that she said yes, and I didn't have to do another rewrite for somebody that wasn't my first choice.
Is that right?
So
That's amazing.
Yeah, we had a list of people to offer it to if she said no, and there was, our casting director had this list of people who might do it, who would not do it at all, not even read the script, because there are certain actors in Hollywood that if you don't have a certain amount of money on the table, they're not even going to consider you, which I understand.
Sure. Yep.
But with Geena was on our casting director said it's not likely, it's a long shot, but she said yes, so we were happy about that. And she was really lovely to work with, and for a movie star, she was about as low maintenance as it gets. So I was just, like, pleasantly surprised that she was just such a lovely person.
Yeah,
and
it's very cool.
We're underdogs. We're Canadian filmmakers, and to have this Oscar-winning actress, like, help us out and, help us make our movie and sign on to do it is pretty much testament to how cool she is as a person. So
yeah, no, that's really cool.
We all just love her. So
well, and
of course she's got to be God.
To quote her from the film, "Thou shalt not quit." So clearly, that's the approach you guys took.
It's very true. It's true, but we didn't have to fight that hard for her.
No, it doesn't sound like it. Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. So how do you take on what I would call, I'm a pretty new parent. I've got a 12-year-old. I've got a 9-year-old boy and a girl, and in the middle of it, digital media, going to school, just all that, those different sort of the friendships, the relationships, the potential for bullying and all that. Take what I would call a pretty serious subject, growing up, coming of age and all that, and turn it into this really playful and fun film that still kind of packs a punch about what it, I hope what it means to be a better human being. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for sure. I think the reason is because I was bullied a lot when I was a kid and in high school. And I can only speak about myself, but it really developed my sense of humor.
Right.
So when you are just forced to toughen up on your own, like, I didn't have any friends for the first, 2 or 3 years of high school. I was a total loner. People made fun of me all the time, and it kind of turns yourself inside, and you become creative about it. You become a writer. You become an artist because the only person that you really interact with is yourself. So you have this way of interacting with the world that's very, very internal, and the only way to survive through it is to develop a sense of humor and almost laugh and mock everything that you interact with. So I think that, like, translating that into filmmaking obviously makes sense. And, I have a dark sense of humor, but I'm a real softie. And
Pat, what's so interesting to me is I didn't really find the film cynical, the storytelling cynical at all. So you say, you mock everything, and I think, and I get that. And such great lines, by the way. Do you know what? I don't think I've come across such a quotable comedic film since Ghostbusters. Honestly, it's
that's fun.
Yeah, like so many one-liners. I mean, it's just crazy. And I love the way you took Hamilton and turned it upside down. But anyway, that's another conversation, perhaps. Yeah. So
right.
yeah. Where's the cynicism?
Well, I think that what I'm talking about is when I turned in as a kid, it was more like cynicism around like regular people, bullies, the jocks, like all of those people. I had this like, you're the enemy. I was always sort of an underdog, and I felt for the underdog. So when I was a kid, like the kids who were nice to me were the freaks.
Right.
They were the fat girls. They were the gay people. They were, you know, the nerds, the punks. Like, it's a funny thing that happens in high school. And I think that I almost, like, want to protect those people.
Right.
And everyone else can go screw themselves, essentially, which is sort of a theme in the movie a little bit. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's so interesting to me is how the lessons that we can learn from these, you know, these supposed losers, right? Like,
right.
One of the questions I had for you was, do you really define Irene as, I mean, and listen, maybe you need to give us a little bit of context, my listeners, a bit of context about the film itself, but, you know, is Irene really a social outcast? Would you call her that?
Not in the grand scheme of things, but I certainly would call her an outcast in school. So, just for context, she is a girl that doesn't have, who's 15 years old. She's a bit of a weirdo, and she's fat, and she wants to be a cheerleader, and nobody believes that she can do it. And in the film, she gets involved in a prank with her bullies, and they all end up having to do community service at a retirement home. And she sees all of these old people who are just watching television and assembles her own cheer squad out of them. So, and then she teaches them how to dance. And eventually she wants to sign them up to go on a talent-themed reality show. So she actually has a lot of confidence as for this outcast. So she's not a total weak. She's definitely not a weak character, and she kind of rolls with the punches of all of the bullying. Like, she just kind of keeps on going. And I've always been inspired by films where you have, you know, characters who are kicked down constantly, and they keep going at their dream no matter how ridiculous it is. Like, I've always loved the movie Working Girl, and it's like, it's so funny that all she wants is like to work for like a corporate business, but she just does whatever she can to do it. And I find that movie really inspiring and makes me feel good, even though I have no idea about, you know, mergers and acquisitions or business or anything. But
well, what I think so cool about Irene and about anyone like her, I think, is that even though maybe she didn't quite have enough self-awareness or a particular kind of self-awareness to say maybe cheerleading's not for you, she has enough self-awareness, enough confidence, enough stick-to-itiveness, like you said, the tenacity to say, you know what, the heck with it, I'm going in anyway. And sure. You know what I mean? That takes a certain amount of personality and ego, right? That clearly other characters in the film and the story don't have. That's a fascinating
that's
story.
True. And, you know, you only have what it takes if you actually go for it. Right.
Which is kind of back to the Geena Davis line, "Thou shalt not quit."
Exactly.
So, am I hearing a lot of 80s music in this film as well? I'm pretty sure I did.
You are hearing 80s and early 90s
music.
We had, it opens with Heart and Soul by T'Pau.
So great.
I love that song.
So great, yeah. And sets the tone
on the Range.
Beautifully.
Yes, it does. Because I love 80s movies, which I'm sure you can tell from the movie. It's like I love 80s teen movies. I grew up watching them.
Is it like A Christmas Story one of your faves?
I love A Christmas Story, actually.
Well,
amazing movie.
I saw quite a bit of Christmas Story in this. I really did. Like, it's
like, cool.
Oh, for me, Ghost World, Napoleon Dynamite, Christmas Story, Little Miss Sunshine. Those are just the ones off the top of my head. It's just,
cool.
Yeah, really fun.
That's great.
So that was clearly intentional. Was that just to sort of contextualize it, or were you actually? Was that? You know, I mean, clearly it's driving the narrative.
It is. It's a few things, because I think that the way that the movie's done, it kind of references old. It's like the aesthetic of it is sort of like an 80s, early 90s teen movie.
Sure.
It's sort of the movie that those movies don't really get made anymore. So there's that.
Right.
But the character of Irene goes into dumpsters and she finds audio tapes.
That's right.
And she loves old people. So everything that she's drawn to is a bit retro. So the music reflected that, and it made sense because, and she likes underdogs too.
Yes.
So
Yep.
Milli Vanilli, who in my opinion are like the ultimate musical underdogs, because I actually feel like those two guys were huge victims of like a corporate music industry, and they made great music, even if they didn't sing it. That's great music.
Well, how can you not like Blame It on the Rain?
It's true. It's such a good song and a great tempo if you're having, senior citizens dance to it. So that was very important. Conscious choice.
Yeah.
To find a song that not only was of that era, but it's an iconic song, but it also was at the right tempo because it wasn't too hard for them. So that was a conscious choice, and it works really well in the movie, thankfully.
You start the film out with and help me out here because I don't know if I got the line exactly, but the key to success is being able to look into the future. Is that?
Yep, and visualize what you want to become.
This is what this film is. I mean, the film's fun. It's a comedy. It's charming. It's light. It's all those things. But when you start to peel back the layers, it actually goes way deeper. This is about self-awareness. This is about becoming, who hopefully we not only want to be but need to be. And so I see this young woman. I'm just trying to think of the line. What does Geena Davis say? She said, "This town doesn't need another regular cheerleader. This town needs you."
Yes, exactly.
I mean, there's so many great lines, Pat. But that's brilliant. To me, that is the story of all of us, right?
Right.
I'm not becoming a cheerleader, but I am becoming me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a lot of seniors are really reacting to the movie in a positive way because there are seniors in the film, and a woman came up to me with her cane. She was probably like in her mid-80s and said, "I went back to university just 3 years ago, and people don't think that you're capable of doing things at a certain point." And I feel like that everybody relates to that because I think everyone has somebody or a group of people who think they aren't capable of what they actually want to do. And why don't we all just go for it and screw everybody, basically, is what Irene does. And the successful people in the world do that. So whether they go to university when they're 83 years old or become a cheerleader when they're fat.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's about stepping into your future in a really intentional way. And that's why there's so many ways you sort of turn that on its head, the maggot and the fly at the end. I mean, it's just, it's certainly not a butterfly, but it's kind of like, it's
flying.
Take what you've been given and turn it into something else and something other.
Exactly.
So who's your Louise? Every Thelma needs her Louise. Great line. Another wonderful line in the film.
Who is my Louise? It would probably be one of my producers. Her name's Allison Richards. We actually met in high school.
Okay.
And she was one of the first people to invite me out socially. When I was a teenager.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you guys go way back.
We stuck together. We go way back. We go back to the 90s. And we've stuck together, and we've made 2 feature films together. And we rely on each other creatively and professionally, but also as friends, which is always kind of interesting because sometimes, you need your producer, but sometimes you need your friend. And we'll have phone calls we'll get together and we'll consciously decide not to talk about any film or the film that we're working on and just catch up as friends. But she would be my Louise, I think.
So tell me a little bit more about the I guess the genesis of. I mean, are you Irene? The genesis of the story.
I'm totally Irene.
You're totally Irene. Okay.
Yeah.
So this was a really backwards high school experience for you?
Yeah, well, I was the new kid, right? I had moved from Ottawa to Toronto when I was right before grade 9. And the thing that's really interesting about when I entered high school is I had long blonde hair and my voice hadn't cracked yet, and my name's Pat, so everybody assumed that I was a girl. But I was also really severely shy, and I wore my hair in front of my eyes. So it was this strange thing where I was terrified of everybody, and I made no friends. I was a bit of a freak, but I also learned what it was like to, firsthand about what it would be like to be a girl, and especially a teenaged girl. So, I would go out and, men would catcall, or I would have a really inappropriate experience with a middle-aged man on the subway. So that kind of created, again, one of those things that creates the artist in you.
Sure.
It's an experience that no one else will have, and it will force you to look at the world in a completely different way because you've had this really special experience. And I'm so happy for that experience because, I really relate to teenage girls, and I still kind of do. Because I know what it's like. It's so awful and it's so awkward.
So that art, that maybe that poetry, or that dealing with the uncomfortableness, I suppose, of life, was it a coping mechanism for you? Would you say?
Oh, likely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's just so cool to me that you can take something like that and turn it into something. Well, it's the fly at the end of the film, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So there's something. So where I'm just looking for the quote about we're one of the older folks in the film, and I just think this is so delightful, and this to me connects so nicely to this is authorial intention, it seems to me, and how the narrative kind of can just kind of come together in a way that's just so beautiful. The key to success is to look into the future. We don't need another cheerleader. We need you. And then this older woman, I think, who says, "We've retired, dear, from everything." And isn't that what this film's about? Not retiring?
Right.
It's about not retiring, right?
Yeah, definitely. And Irene is a character who pulls them out of that thought,
Absolutely. Well, this is what I mean, what's so beautiful about her, about she's so not the loser, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell me, finding Irene, she's from, can you tell me a little bit about that process? Is Michelle her name?
Michelle McLeod.
Michelle McLeod from Peterborough.
Her first feature film, and it was so hard to find her.
I bet.
I understand that. I knew that it was going to be a hard time finding our Irene because she has to be a teenager, she has to be funny, she has to be able to dance, and she's also a body type that never gets encouraged to become an actor. Right. If you look at headshots, everybody just looks the same, and I'm not interested in telling those stories. So we did a casting call and looked all across Canada. We put up postings in high schools. We looked non-union, union, and we just couldn't find anybody. People are either too old or very young, and actually just, I knew that they couldn't handle the material. And then we ended up hiring an American casting director to search all across the U.S., and we couldn't find anyone, and we ended up pushing the shoot 3 separate times because we couldn't find our Irene, and if we couldn't find her, it wasn't going to work.
Right.
And then probably about 6 months after the first or second time we pushed the shoot, we got a submission in from the U.S., and it was Michelle, and I was like, oh, I think that she's really good, and it was submitted to the U.S. casting, not to the Canadian one. So we assumed that she was American, and she assumed we were American. And then when I did a bit of research and talked to the agent, I found out that she lived in Etobicoke. We were shooting in Hamilton, and I live in Toronto. So she was smack dab between where I was coming from and where we were shooting.
So you picked her up on the way to the shoot, right?
Yeah, well, we did. We absolutely did. And I joke that we spent a lot of money to find our neighbor.
Right.
Because we hired this casting director to look everywhere. And if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have found her. And I think that what had happened is she was in between agents, so she didn't actually have representation when the Canadian casting call went out.
Oh, okay.
And then she got a new agent who submitted her to the American casting call. So we auditioned her about 2 times, and then I knew that she was like, okay, I think that she's the one. But I wanted for her final callback, I wanted her to, like, get the tone. So we got together. I had coffee with her before she officially had the part, and I gave her 3 movies to watch.
Okay.
And I think it was Election, Robbie and Michelle's high school reunion, and Welcome to the Dollhouse. Because I wanted her to, like, understand tone and,
right.
like, fun comedy, but also stuff that goes a bit dark.
Right.
And I liked there were parts of Election where, you know, Tracy's crying with her mother, and because it actually feels really true. Like, the thing about Election is it's not like Romy and Michelle's high school reunion. It's actually got some true, real emotion and, like, great performances in that movie that seem really natural. So I wanted her to watch that as well, because I just didn't want it to be, like, broad, shticky comedy.
Right. Well, this is what's so beautiful about it, and you really, I don't know, you do that dance really, really well, Pat, because it's the kind of film that I think it must be pretty hard to create. Like you say, we couldn't have made this film without Michelle, or at least that's what I'm hearing you say, or somebody like her, the character. You know, how do you get that balance of comedy with the right music and the absurdity and the darkness, and still come out on the other side?
Yeah, it's tough.
It's got to be tough.
And I knew that tone was like a big thing, and I wanted everyone to be on the same page and be in the same kind of movie, because that's when directors kind of mess up, where they don't communicate what kind of movie all of their actors are in.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay,
sometimes you just forget, but it's like the most important thing. You should, like, reference as many movies, get them to watch them, and really communicate what each scene is about, what the movie is about, and I wanted everything to be sort of grounded in reality, but be ridiculous enough to be entertaining, but I didn't want it to be broad, and I wanted people to believe every scene that it was in, and that, like, it has moments of being ridiculous and, like, such a movie, but it also is I wanted it to be grounded. That was a big, big thing, and it was about communication, talking to all the actors and let them know what kind of movie they're in. Because some people would come into the audition and assume it was really, like, broad comedy, and they'd come in like they were, you know, doing sketch comedy. And I wasn't interested in doing that at all. So it was about, like, almost bringing the performances down to a non-Second City main stage space. You know what I mean?
I do, yeah. Park Ontario does not exist, does it?
It does not exist, and it's funny. It was originally set in Mono, Ontario, which is, I think, close to Orangeville, because I thought that was just a funny name for a town. But the thing is Mono is actually very beautiful, and it's where people go and get their wedding photos taken. So it didn't totally work, but also our lawyer said that, you know, we should maybe make it a fictional town because we don't want to upset anyone.
You don't want to piss the mayor off of some town somewhere in northern Ontario.
Exactly, and I think that Mono has money. So I was like, okay, well, I'll change it. And I ended up making it Park because Park is an anagram to crap.
Right.
So that's where that came from.
Is that a little bit of that dark edge coming out? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's so wonderful because, like I said earlier, I'm still fascinated by the fact that if you were, you know, I hardly know you at all, Pat, but you know, that bullying. I mean, that's not an easy thing to deal with as a kid. And what I find fascinating is it's created. It sounds to me like an artist who has a really fun, delightful kind of. You don't take yourself too seriously kind of approach to the world, which I think is really quite marvelous.
Oh, good. Yeah, sometimes I take myself too seriously, but it's usually when I'm editing a movie. So.
Oh, right.
But generally, I don't take.
So when it comes to something technical, you get a little serious. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
One of my fave lines, I mean, again, so many, has to be, is watching TV and waiting to die a cure for arthritis. It
apparently is not. So.
It's apparently not, yes. And how many of those characters were actually out of your life?
Oh, like all of the characters in the film?
Yeah, like the teacher who's got the flask in his desk. I'm drunk, I'm not a drunk. That's hilarious, too, by the way.
Oh, that's a reference to my first film, Guidance.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, missed that.
I ended up, so that's me in the movie as the drunk teacher. And in my first film, I played a drunk guidance counselor. And my producers were like, "Oh, it would be fun if you played that role." And I really didn't want to. I'm like, I just want to be at the monitor the entire time in this movie, but I ended up doing it. So that's based on a character that I had made a film around 3 years ago called Guidance. And then all the other characters are just taken from different people. There's I'm in Tesh as well as Irene. My mom is in Irene's mom, and just a lot of my friends are in all the other characters. And I did have, I think, a great grandmother who had a lot of energy and was a bit inappropriate at times. Right. So she went into the Ruth character.
Yes,
so.
yeah. That's a really interesting balance too. That balance between that sort of absurdity and that really, I was going to use the word harsh. Harsh is the wrong word, but that in-your-face kind of humor. You know, those lines that you just don't expect to come out of that person. Did she just say that?
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm sure we'll pull this back into a sort of a fun comedic kind of ending, but I do want to ask you this question as we end, and I've got to wrap it up here in a couple of minutes. But you know, it's between Irene, a conversation between Irene and her mom. It gets a little heated, still quite funny, still quite absurd in its own way, but really real, where she's basically saying, you know, you didn't want me. You ended up with this daughter that you never really wanted. There's this whole sense of I'm not included, I'm not loved, I'm not embraced. And she says something about why don't we spend more time, is it living in the living room? And her mom says, because living stains.
Right.
I mean, this is not just, this is a comedian that's got a statement to make, it seems to me. You know what I mean? This is a profoundly sort of existential comment. It's so wonderful and sort of contradictory. And I just wonder where's that coming from? I mean, is that ultimately for you what this film really is all about, in a sense? Yeah,
like if you're not staining something, you're probably not living properly. That's what I think. And like I think that the mother characters is all about protecting her daughter, and so she's not actually living, and the daughter just wants to get out there and live. And so there's just the difference between the two characters is one doesn't want anyone in the living room, because I never understood that. People who cover their furniture in plastic and like you're not allowed in certain rooms, I just don't get it.
No.
And it's usually the living room, and I always found that so funny. It's like, well, it's like so perfectly, pathetically ironic that you're not allowed to go into the living room.
Yeah, no.
I always found that really funny.
It's perfect. What did you say? Perfectly, pathetically ironic. It really is true. I mean, isn't this what this is about? It's about getting your shoes on and getting out there, and stepping into it. It's wonderful. And again, Pat, thanks so much. We've been talking to Pat Mills today about his new film, Don't Talk to Irene. You got to get out there and see it. I hope everybody gets to see this, Pat. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun.